In this video, we're going to be walking through how to create a calendar app using D3. It's going to be a little bit of Google Calendar clone. And the end product is going to look a little bit like this. This is a little calendar that I created on Observable, showing my son's sleep schedule and feeding schedule. So this is on Observable. I'll drop the link in the description so you can see. There's also going to be a link in the description for a full blog post walking you through how to do this. That's going to be on LogRocket's blog. So hopefully that'll help out too. You go ahead and follow that if you're more into the written kind of blog. And that's also going to have some code samples for you that you can copy and paste if you want that. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll open up our terminal. Let's change into a directory that we want. And I think I already have a directory here that I'm going to get rid of that I previously had used for this as I was running through this to make sure I don't have any mistakes in there. So now that I cleared that out, let's create it again. So we're going to call this calendar clone, and we'll jump in there. Once we've changed into it, let's go ahead and initialize our npm package. Then once we've done that, let's go ahead and install Snowpack, which is what we're going to be using to scaffold our application. Once we've installed Snowpack, we can go ahead and also install D3. So this one will do install -- save, because this is not a dev dependency. This is actually going to be a production dependency if we were going to production with this. Okay, so we've got that. Now we can go ahead and open VS Code in this directory so we can start editing some files. So let's go ahead and create a new file. It's going to be an index.html file, and we'll just drop in some boilerplate code in here, set our title, give us a little heading, and we're going to import our index.js file that we're about to create. Notice that there's a type module. This is going to be important for loading the file. When we run Snowpack, if we don't have this, this is not going to work. So let's go ahead and create that file. Our index.js file, let's just make sure this is going to work, and we can log something out here if I can type. Let's say just something simple like this. Let's save this up. We'll open up our terminal, and we can, we want to do Snowpack dev here. So npx will run any command of a package that you have installed in your project. We also could create a script in here if we wanted to add it to our scripts. We could do like dev, and we could say Snowpack dev. But I don't want to add that right now, so we'll just go ahead and start this. Should open a window in Chrome, and it did. I'll pull that over to our window so you can see it. Okay, cool. So we've got this with our heading that we set out, and we have she should be sleeping, which is exactly what we want. Okay, I said Chrome, but apparently it's Firefox. So let's jump back into our code here. Now that we have our code, we can, we know that it's running. It's displaying that console log. We can get rid of that. And we're going to start importing some things into our application. So let's get rid of this. And we're going to import D3. Let's see. So we want to import star as D3 from D3. And then we're also going to define a calendar events array. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this one in from the blog post that I mentioned. This is coming from the LogRocket blog post. straighten that out. Okay, so now we've got our calendar events and our dates. So each of our calendar events are just objects that are going to contain time from, to, the title, and the background. And this background is going to be the background color of the rectangles that we're going to be drawing for those calendar events. Time from and to, these are just date objects. One good thing about just doing this project as is we can just define the data in whatever shape we want. Normally you would have to pull in data from a certain source and manipulate that data in a certain way. And you're going to see that in a lot of your data projects and your D3 projects if you're working on D3 or data visualizations. So we kind of get to bypass that in this video, in this tutorial. And then we take these calendar events and we're mapping these to a dates array, which is going to be helpful for us when we create our Y scale later. Okay, now let's declare a couple of like standard D3 variables. So first we're going to have margin, and this is typically going to be an object that's going to have different pixel values for margins that you want on each side of your visualization. So let's just pop these all in. They're mostly going to be 30, but then on our left we're going to have 50. Okay, we got that. Let's close that out. Then we're also going to do our height, and this is going to be 1500, and our width, and this is going to be 900. There's also a way that you can make this kind of stuff responsive and observable. That's kind of going to happen automatically. Width is going to be responsive. I'm also going to be making another video in the future about how to make D3 visualizations responsive. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, we're also going to add some variables that are not as common in D3 projects. This one's going to be just specific to this project. So we have our bar width and then our now color. And then we're going to have our bar style. So this is going to be the style for the rectangles that we're drawing for each of the events. So we want to have our default background color. This is just a color that I probably took using color picker from Google Calendar. We're going to have our text color, which is just going to be white. Then we'll have our width, which we don't actually really need in here because we're just taking it from bar width, but we'll go ahead with that anyway. We're going to have our start padding because we don't want our events to be just like pressed up against each other. It'll look a little nicer with some padding. We'll also have end padding. It's going to be 3. And then we're going to have a radius because it's nice to have these rectangles a little rounded. Again, getting inspiration from Google Calendar. So these are not completely original values, but just kind of eyeballing against those. So let's go ahead and create our SVG item to begin with. So we're going to do d3.create SVG. And once we create this, we're going to assign some attributes to it, and then we're going to append it to the DOM. So let's just first do document.body.append child. And this is where we're going to do svg.node. svg.node is going to be the actual DOM node that it's going to create. And then before we actually jump into that, let's give it a few attributes. So we're going to see these attributes in the DOM when we inspect this. So we'll give it width, and then we can also give it the height that we wanted here. Let's say height. Okay, so we are running Snowpack Dev already. So this should be updating in the browser window that we have. We created our SVG element, set our width and our height, and then we appended it to the DOM. So let's take a look in here. We don't see anything, but if we go ahead and inspect elements, we do see this giant SVG element. Okay, that's what we care about. That's what we want. So we've got our width and our height that we set. So now that we've got our SVG drawn, we can go ahead and start drawing the stuff that we care about. So let's start with our axis on the left, which is going to be showing the different times of the day, just like you'd see in Google Calendar. So we'll go ahead and declare our y-axis variable, which is something that you'll see that's kind of standard. It's either going to be no, it's going to be y-axis almost all the time. I was going to talk about our scale variable, which we'll see that in a second. Actually, you know what? I'm jumping the gun. We do want to do our y scale, so let's do our y scale first, which is going to be a time scale. Normally, you'd see a time scale on the x-axis, but because this is a calendar, our time scale is going to be on the y-axis. So let's go ahead and say scale time. And with this scale time, we want to set the domain, which is basically an array that's going to contain the minimum and the maximum values that we want. Okay, so the values are the minimum and maximum values of time. That's why we wanted our dates array that we created up here, this one. So from this array, we're going to take the minimum and maximum values. So let's say d3.min, and this is going to be our dates. Oops, dates. And then as a second one, we want to do d3.max. And then we're going to give it dates. Okay, so the domain is the minimum, maximum things we're passing in as data. And then we also want to have the range. And the range is going to be basically the minimum and maximum pixel values. So again, we're going to have an array. And because the y goes from bottom to top, let's see, top to bottom, not bottom to top. So y0 is on the top and y, let's say 100 is on the bottom, or whatever your max value is, it's going to be on the bottom. So we'll say top is the first, it's going to be the minimum, and then our height minus our margin is going to be on the bottom is going to be the end, the max. Okay, so you see the bottom corresponds with max and min corresponds with top. Okay, and so that should be good. That's our scale, which isn't going to do anything yet until we use it. But once we use it in the axis, then we're going to see it. So let's say the y-axis is going to be axis left, and we're going to give it some ticks, and we're going to give it 24 ticks, one for each half hour of the day. So 2 times 12. And then we're going to pass in the scale, which is the y scale that we just defined. And let's see, that should be good. So because we're telling where the y scale should be, we should be all set there. We should have 24 ticks, and it should correspond to time. So let's go ahead and check out what we have here. We don't have anything yet, and that's because we haven't appended our axis to our SVG. So let's go ahead and do that. We always have to make sure we append stuff somewhere. Most stuff is going to just be appended to the SVG, and yeah, then it'll show up in the DOM. So let's go ahead and say svg.append g. So we're going to append a g element, and we're going to give it this attribute transform to move it over. And let's say translate margin left. So it's going to be translated x margin left. So it'll move over past our margin, which is what we want. And then y is just going to stay on the top. Okay, and then for the ticks, we don't want them to be fully opaque. So we want them to be more like a little grayish. So let's set the opacity to 0.5. And then here we're going to do call y-axis, and that's going to bring the y-axis into the SVG element. Okay, so let's check out our app here. Looks like we've got our axis here. It's showing all the times of the day. We do have like Wednesday the 11th because I hard-coded the dates to the 11th of November 2020. So we have those in there. We can fix those later so it doesn't quite show that. But now we need to get our grid lines in here, and then we also need to get the rectangles into the grid lines. So we're actually going to see calendar events there. But we can see if we look in the inspector here in the browser devtools, which are super helpful for debugging stuff, you're going to have your SVG, your G element, and you can see all these ticks and you can inspect a bunch of stuff. But anytime there's anything going wrong, you're probably going to want to look at these to see what attributes are being assigned and what kind of stuff is happening in your actual DOM. So that's good for now. I mentioned that we're going to play with this because it's hard-coded. So let's get rid of that. We probably just wanted to say 12 a.m. instead of saying Wednesday the 11th. And then down here we can say 12 a.m. as well, just so it'll show midnight. So let's jump over to our code and apply some styles to make that happen. So we'll do svg.selectAll, and we know it's within a G element, and it's going to have tick class. If we look at this, we can see it's G and the class is tick. So we'll do G tick, and we want to filter. So we don't want to do all ticks. We only want to do really the first and the last. Okay, so let's pass in our data item, I and ticks, and what we want to do is check only for if I is 0 or if I is ticks.length -1. So that's going to be the last item in that array of ticks. And if it is, we want to get that text, and then we want to make the text be 12 a.m. Okay, so this should overwrite that previously those dates and just set that to 12 a.m. Okay, and so I changed the first one and the last one. Those are both 12 a.m. now. All right, now let's go ahead and add our grid lines that we mentioned. So it actually looks like a calendar app. We can see what it's going to look like before we drop the calendar events in. So let's say grid lines is going to equal D3 dot. We're actually going to make this an axis as well, even though it's not really an axis. It's easier to make it an axis, so we'll just do the same thing. We're giving it 24 ticks, and we can set the tick size on this, so we'll actually just make this the full length. So this is going to be bar style dot width, so the full width of the bars. And then we want to do tick format, not ticket. And the tick format is just going to have nothing. So it's going to have no text for it. And then we'll also apply a scale, which is going to be our same old Y scale that we had for before. So this should give us an axis on the right, which isn't really going to be an axis because it's going to be full width ticks. So it's really going to be more like a grid. And then the ticks are going to have no text. There's going to be 24 of them. And it's going to be on the same Y scale. So that means it's going to go from the top to the bottom of our visualization. And then this is really just like creating this axis, and it's not appending it. So if you remember, now we have to, just like we did up here, we appended this axis. And we're going to want to do the same thing. See what kind of changes we have to make here. Drop in here. We're going to append to the SVG. And we might be able to just do the same exact thing, but this time we're going to do grid lines. So let's see if we need to make changes to that. Looks like we don't. So now we got our grid lines in here. They're showing up straight in here. And now we just need to add some events. So let's go ahead and continue on down here. And this time we're going to make a variable called bar groups. So this is going to be what we're going to do is, if you remember the thing that we showed you before at the start, we had like events, and each event is comprised of a rectangle and then text within that rectangle. So we're going to make a group for each event, and then within that group, that SVG element, we're going to add a rectangle and we're going to add text. So let's go ahead and get started by creating those groups. So those bar groups, we're going to do d3.selectAll, and this is going to be g.barGroup. So this is selecting all elements that are G's and have the class of bar group, which is going to be nothing. But we can do select all data and join. So it's basically going to select all and then apply the data and join it to any existing elements. It's kind of the pattern in D3. You'll probably see it a lot. At first it's weird, but then you kind of get used to it. So join will basically update anything that exists, which, like we said, nothing exists, but we're going to add to it. So to that, we're going to add a G element, and we're going to give it that class that we mentioned, which is going to be our bar group class. So we're doing that, and we're not using bar groups yet. But let's see, are we appending that to the SVG? I think this will get appended to the SVG. Yeah, let's check out what happens in here. So we've got our ticks, right? So we're creating 3 bar groups. So it's not getting added to the SVG, but we can still place them. So it's not getting added to the SVG, and that is because we did d3.selectAll. So if we do svg.selectAll, it's going to change it. It's now going to put those bar groups inside the SVG. Cool, so we've got those there. They're just not showing anything because they don't have the rectangle or the text like we mentioned. So let's go ahead and add the rectangles first. That'll have that background color that we kind of saw from the start. So for our bar groups, we're going to do bargroups.append, and we're going to say rect element. And for each of these elements, we're going to give a couple attributes. We'll just plow through this. And you'll see as we set the height here, we're doing some calculations. We do a start point, which is going to be using the time from, and then the endpoint is going to be using the time to. And then we're going to do some math to calculate how those are going to set the height of it. So the endpoint minus the start point minus the end padding minus the start padding. Play around with that. If that's confusing to you at all, you'll kind of get the hang of why that is happening. And then we'll just set the width, and the Rx is going to be the radius. So we'll set that to the bar style .radius. So let's save this and see how that turns out. Looks like we had a typo in here. So we have end point. That should fix it. And we're still using inspect, so it's showing some stuff over it. But you can see our rectangles are in here now. So we have our rectangles now, and now we want to add our text, and then we also want to add a little tracker in here to see what time is now. So like it's 10 o'clock right now, and so we want to see a little thing here to show what time it is, just like you'd see on Google Calendar or Outlook or whatever calendar you're using. So let's go ahead and add the now line, which is just going to be another rectangle, but really thin. And then we'll also add in the text for the title of each of these events. So let's jump in here, and we can go ahead and add our, we're going to do like our current time date. And we're going to do some hacks here. Because we're just doing a single day application, and it's just using, like I said, that November 11th. We want to set our date to the 11th, and then we want to set our month to the, let's see, set date, set month to the 10 because it's a 0-based month. And then we want to set our year to 2020, set full year. Yep. So yeah, make sure you set full year, not set year. And then once we have that should give us our current time date, which we're going to use to make our bar. So we're going to be appending our bar, which is like the now bar. So we're going to be appending this to bar groups as well. So let's go ahead and append. And just like I said, this is going to be like a really small rect. So rectangle, let's be explicit about that. And then again, we'll just plow through applying some attributes here, just like we've done in the past. And if you inspect the element in your browser DevTools, then you'll see all of these attributes showing up as we inspect that. Okay, so it's just gonna be 2 pixels tall, and we're gonna give it the full width of the bar, of the bar style width, the full width, whatever we set that to, wherever this bar style width comes from. Okay, cool, so let's check it out. Like I said, we're at 10 p.m. So boom, there we got our now line. We don't have anything updating that, so we could do like a set interval and update that from time to time if we wanted to. Okay, now all we need is our text to show our titles of our events. And then we're gonna be on our way. We're gonna have $1 million calendar app to sell to people. So let's go ahead and we're gonna add 2 bar groups as well. Remember I mentioned, and this time we're gonna append text. And then again, we're gonna plow through some of these attributes. We'll set the font family, the font size, font weight, text anchor start. That just means the position that we set is going to be the start of the text. The fill is going to be the color, like we've done before. We'll set the X and Y, and then our text itself is going to be the title from our calendar events array. Okay, and that should be enough for us. So let's jump back into our app. You see the title is showing up here in text. And again, we have our other titles in here. We've got the rectangle to actually show the event, and then we've got our little now line here. Like I said, you can jump into the DevTools and look at each of these. We can see, let's go ahead and find the text. We can see all the attributes that we set here. We set these in code and they're showing up in here. So if you ever have to debug, a lot of times it's good to check the attributes you're setting. And we have a bar group for each of our events. We have all of our G elements we're expecting, and everything is in here. So that gives you a good rundown on how to create a calendar app in D3. If that's your kind of thing, you probably wouldn't want to do it with D3, but it's really good to do these kinds of projects to learn. You'll make a lot of mistakes and then learn from them, and then you can create something useful with D3. So we saw how to use axes, make different ticks, append text, append rectangles, set attributes, and a bunch of different stuff just from doing this little silly calendar app. So hopefully that helps out. If you have any troubles with this, just keep at it. It's hard stuff. Program is always going to be hard, but keep at it. Let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to help. And hopefully this video is helpful to you. Hopefully the next one will be helpful to you as well.